Death at Daisy's Folly, Chapter 14. Our rule was no scandal. Whenever there was a threat of proceedings, pressure would be brought to bear, sometimes from the highest quarters and almost always successfully. We realized that publicity would bring us into disrepute, and as we had no intention of changing our mode of living, we saw to it that 5 out of every 6 scandals never reached the outside world. Frances Daisy Brooke, Lady Warwick, Discretions. There was a metallic clatter in the lane beyond Stonehall. "The Daimler at last!" Lord Warwick exclaimed, rising from the carved wooden bench on which he and Friedrich Temple had been sitting for a good part of the morning. Kate rose too, glad that the long wait was now finally over. A few moments later the prince strode impatiently onto the scene. "What's all this about a murder?" he demanded, of Lord Warwick, who had stepped forward to meet him. "Do you have any idea how fast we drove to get back here?" He turned to Bradford Marston, who, with Sir Charles and Andrew Kirke-Smythe, was at his heels. "How fast did we drive, Marston?" "By my watch, sir," Bradford said, "we covered the 13 miles in 52 minutes. "Astonishing," the prince said. He shook his head. "Perhaps you're right, Marston. Perhaps this machine is the wave of the future." He turned around, remembering why they had actually come back. "I tell you, Brooke, if this murder business is someone's idea of a practical joke, I will personally have his—" Wordlessly, Lord Warwick reached down and removed the horse blanket covering the dead man. The prince stared down at Wallace's unmoving body, which lay on the path in front of a low stone bench. Then he bent over and examined the hole in the center of the dead man's forehead. "Jupiter!" he breathed. "So that's why he didn't appear for breakfast," he straightened up. "Come here, Sheridan, and have a look." "I did not think it right to move him until you arrived, Bertie," Lord Warwick said. He looked down sadly. "Poor old Reggie. We had words occasionally, but he was a gentleman through. Absolutely fair, you know, and quite discreet, could be trusted with any secret." Kate's nose tickled, and she suddenly sneezed, startling Lord Warwick into an awareness of her presence. He closed his mouth firmly, just as she was wishing that she could hear what secrets had been entrusted to Lord Wallace. It did seem curious that a man would praise a wise former lover for his fairness and discretion. What a complicated web of relationships was woven by these affairs. Before her stood a husband and a current lover conferring over the body of the former. "Miss Audley?" Charles asked in surprise, apparently just noticing her. "It was Miss Audley and my misfortune to discover the body," Sir Friedrich said smoothly. He moved close to Kate. "We had hoped to come to have a look at the Folly." Kate stepped away, conscious that Stone's tone might be wrongly interpreted, and from Charles' frown she could see that it had been. "It is more accurate to say that I was returning to the lodge for a brief walk through the garden accompanied by Sir Friedrich," she amended tartly. "In any case, gentlemen," Sir Friedrich said with a slight smile, "I must report that Miss Audley has been reading detective stories. She forbade me to touch the body and insisted I send one of the gardeners in search of Brooke." He glanced at Charles. "She was most emphatic that you be summoned too, Sheridan. She said, and I quote, 'We must not disturb the crime scene until Sir Charles has arrived.'" His tone became patronizing. "We should congratulate the lady for her knowledge of police procedures, wouldn't you say?" "Quite right," the prince said briskly. "Good girl, Kate." He turned to Charles. "Well, Charles, it looks as if you have another corpse on your hands." "Forgive me, sir," Charles said. This is clearly not a case of accidental death. The investigation is a task for the police." "It might be suicide, of course," Kirke-Smythe said thoughtfully. "Suicide?" Kate asked. "But there's no weapon. At least—" She added less eagerly, sensible that the men had all turned to stare at her. "There's none in sight." While she had been sitting on the bench, Kate, or rather the irrepressible Beryl Bardwell, she of the avid interest, had been searching with her eyes and detected no gun. She had seen 1 or 2 other things, however. "It is possible," Charles said, "that someone else might have happened on the body before you discovered it and taken the weapon." He turned to the prince. "But suicide or murder, the fact remains that the investigation is police business. Brooke must summon the local constable at once." Lord Warwick shook his head. "I don't like the idea of the police." He looked at the prince and Sir Friedrich. "Gentlemen, perhaps we should discuss—" While the three men drew together to talk and Bradford and Kirk Smythe was bending over the body, Kate went to Sir Charles. "Charles," she said in a low voice, "there's something I must tell you." He pressed his lips together. "If it's about you and Temple," he said, "I don't want to hear it. What you do is your own private—" "Fiddlesticks," Kate retorted smartly. "You know me better than to think I would allow myself to be compromised by a man like Temple. What I have to tell you concerns the handkerchief and the—" "What handkerchief?" "The one about 18 inches to the right of your left foot, caught on that rose bush." She saw his eyes go to the small scrap of white. "I didn't want to call Lord Warwick's or Sir Friedrich's attention to it, since they would most certainly feel compelled to take it up, and I knew you wouldn't want the crime scene disturbed." She glanced over her shoulder. "No one is looking. You have the opportunity of retrieving it." "No," Charles said. "I would rather first photograph it in place." Bradford straightened. "Clever of you to stow the camera in the motor car," he remarked. "Shall I fetch it?" "Please," Sir Charles said. He turned back to Kate. "No one has moved the body, then?" "Not while I've been on the scene," she said. She consulted the watch pinned to her lapel. "Sir Friedrich and I stumbled onto the corpse a moment or two past 9. It is now just past noon." Charles gave her a brief smile. "I must compliment you. If the police manage to solve this, their success will largely be due to your insistence that the scene remain undisturbed." "But I'm afraid I did disturb the scene," she said ruefully. "When I first saw the body, I observed a piece of paper protruding rather obviously from a breast pocket. I asked Sir Friedrich to step away and send a nearby gardener for Lord Warwick. While he was thus occupied, I took the paper out of the pocket only because I feared that someone might see it and become curious about it before you arrived." She reached into her reticule, took out a folded piece of paper, and pressed it into his hand. "Here it is. I have not had the opportunity to read it." There was no opportunity for Charles to read it either. The three men had completed their consultation. The prince turned, grim-faced. "Charles," he said, "I don't need to tell you what will happen when the police arrives with the press hot on their heels. The Tranby Croft fiasco, which involved merely a bit of gaming, not murder, will be as nothing compared to the stink that will be raised about the 2 deaths that occurred this weekend. To exclude the press, we must exclude the police." He paused for emphasis. "Do you take my point?" Charles shifted his weight uneasily. "I understand the difficulty of dealing with inquisitive press, sir, but anyone who conceals a murder may be judged an accessory to it. Have you considered that?" "Indeed I have," the prince replied severely, "which is why you've just been commissioned an officer of the law." If His Highness had not been serious, Kate would have smiled. Sir Charles Sheridan, about to become the 5th Baron or something of other, an officer of the law? Charles's jaw tightened. "Forgive me, sir, but I am not." "Oh, yes, you are," the prince replied. He raised his walking stick. "I hereby appoint you, Sir Charles Sheridan, as a temporary captain of the household police of His Highness of the Prince of Wales, and I invest you with the authority to investigate this conspiracy." Charles tried one last time. "But I must point out, sir, that the local authorities have jurisdiction." "Sheridan," the prince thundered, "this investigation is your duty." Kate flinched. Charles straightened and looked at the prince in the eye. "Yes, sir," he said. "Forgive me, sir, but you mentioned a conspiracy. Might I ask?" "It also involves the death of the boy. I don't for a minute believe the horse had anything to do with it." "A conspiracy, Bertie?" Lord Warwick looked uneasy. "You mean you think there's a link between your stable boys getting a knock on the head and somebody doing in poor Reggie?" "It's possible," the prince said. "What if Harry saw or heard something he shouldn't have? Something that made him dangerous?" "Entirely correct, sir," Kirk Smythe put in. "The lad might have eavesdropped on some sort of plot and then was killed to keep him from revealing his suspicions to me." "Ah, yes, of course." The prince, pleased, turned to Charles. "There, you see, Charles, half of your work, the logical half, has been done for you. All you have to do is find the evidence. What do you say?" Charles said the only thing he could say, given the circumstances. "Yes, sir." "Excellent," the prince exclaimed. "And one more thing. Since this matter so obviously involves the security of the realm, I must instruct you to maintain the strictest secrecy in your investigation. No word of this is to get to the outside world." "I fail to see," Charles said carefully, "how the security of the realm got into the matter." The prince assumed a patient expression. "I am now compelled to believe, Charles, that this crime and the other are part of a plot. Your investigation must be kept secret in order to ensure that no word of it disturbs the populace or alerts the anarchists who might just use it to seize some villainous advantage." Charles was stroking his brown beard. "Suppose for a moment, sir, that this is not an anarchist plot but a simple case of murder. Suppose, hypothetically of course, that my investigation reveals that the murderer is one of the servants, or perhaps one of our party. What then? Will that person be turned over to the proper authorities?" "In this matter," the prince said decidedly, "I am the proper authority. Now, get to it, Charles. Question whom you will, investigate whom you must. No hold barred, as it were. We must have the truth of this matter. I shall want your very first report in an hour." He pulled out his heavy gold pocket watch and frowned at it. "No, make that 2 hours. We are abominably late for luncheon, as is." From his half-audible sigh, Kate understood that Charles had unwillingly resigned himself to the task. "Perhaps, sir, I should consult with you when I have something to report. It may be 2 hours or—" "Oh, very good," the prince said impatiently. "Now, shall we?" "Speaking of luncheon," Charles went on, "it might be a good idea if you announced the murder and requested the cooperation of the guests and their servants, the Eastern servants as well, sir." "The guests?" Sir Friedrich asked with a small laugh. "Surely you don't for a moment imagine that one of us would—" Charles looked at him. "I have no way of knowing, Temple, whether this investigation will lead me to a servant or to a guest. With that in mind, sir," he said to the prince, "no one who is here now must be allowed to leave." "Good thought," the prince agreed. "Put a cork in the bottle, as it were. Well then, I will make the announcement. The murderer is likely known anyway." He turned to go. "And there is the corpse," Charles said. The prince paused. "Oh yes, poor Reggie. We can't just let him lie here, I suppose." He pulled his brows together. "But we can't have him in the house either, disturbing the lady's sensibilities. Well, then—" "How about the game larder, Bertie?" Lord Warwick suggested. "The game larder? Capital!" The prince thumped his walking stick to the ground. "Get some men and take him there at once." "I shall need to photograph the scene first," Charles said. He stepped forward, knelt beside the body, lifted the head and turning it slightly. After a brief examination, he stood again. "I shall also require the services of a competent surgeon." Sir Friedrich frowned. "A surgeon? But the man is quite dead." "Since there is no evident exit wound, the bullet must still be in the body. I would like to recover it." The prince grimaced. "It seems a rather macabre souvenir." "Not a souvenir, sir. Evidence. With luck, a bullet can be traced to the gun that fired it." "The exact gun?" Sir Friedrich asked curiously. Lord Warwick looked sceptical. "I've had a great deal of experience with guns, Charles. A bullet might reveal the caliber and type of the gun that fired it, but beyond that—" "When I was visiting the Krupp munitions works," Charles said, "I noticed the driving bands with which the shells are fitted. When the shell is fired, these copper bands are forced into the spiral grooves that are cut into the inner surface of the gun barrel. It's rifling, that is. These grooves, as you may be aware, force the projectile to rotate." "Every sportsman knows as much," Sir Friedrich said impatiently. "The rotation prevents the projectile from tumbling while in flight and increases its range and accuracy, but I fail to see what that has to do with—" "As I studied the copper bands," Charles said, "I noticed that the shells fired from the same weapon bore identical markings, but that these were different from markings on the shells fired by another weapon. As I looked into the matter further, I discovered that different arms manufacturers use different riflings. From model to model, there is a great variation among the number of grooves the angle twist, and the width of the grooves and the lands, the smooth surfaces between the grooves. Theoretically, at least, it is possible to identify the weapon from which a particular bullet was fired." "Amazing!" Lord Warwick exclaimed. He frowned. "I'm not sure I see the practical application, though." "Don't you?" the prince said. "I dare say the police do. As a matter of fact," Charles said, "a murder conviction was obtained in Lyon in '89 upon the testimony of Professor Qa'Rajh, who compared the marks on a fatal bullet and found them identical to the rifling of a gun owned by one of the suspects. While his conclusion is open to question, the conviction demonstrates that such evidence is useful in prosecution." "By Jove!" the prince exclaimed. "What wonders science is visiting upon us!" He frowned down at Wallace's body. "The projectile is of no use, however, unless there is a weapon against which it may be compared." "Precisely, but the weapon may come to light. Meanwhile, I should like to try and retrieve the bullet. There is a surgeon in Chelmsford who has my trust, a Dr. John Miles." "I shall be glad to send the carriage," Lord Warwick offered. There was a rattle of footsteps on the gravel, and Bradford appeared with the camera gear. "Sorry to be delayed," he said to Charles. "Your gear had been unpacked and taken to your room." "Send Marston," the prince said. "He is eager enough to put that motor car of his into use." "Oh, absolutely, sir," Bradford said, sitting down the camera. "Where am I going?" "To Chelmsford for a surgeon," Charles said. "His name is Dr. John Miles. You will find him in High Street at the number 22. He turned to the prince. "In the meantime, I suggest that your highness have Wallace's room sealed and post a guard at the door." "Excellent idea," Sir Friedrich put in. "Reggie's belongings may contain vital evidence." "Yes," Sir Charles agreed. "We need someone reliable. Everyone must be kept out." The prince turned to Kirkesmythe. "Room guarding is up your line, Kirkesmythe. I'll have a lunch plate sent up to you." Kirkesmythe came to attention. "Your highness will be safe?" "Of course I will be safe," the prince said testily. "After all, I am among friends. This bodyguarding business can be carried a bit too far, if you ask me." Kate looked at Kirkesmythe, suddenly realizing what she might have guessed before, that the man was assigned to protect the prince. It must not be an easy job. "But, sir," Kirkesmythe objected, "the Queen is quite concerned about anarchists, and when she learns of Lord Wallace's murder she will be deeply worried that—" "Oh, blast the Queen," the prince said. "Anyway, I don't intend Mama to learn of the murder until Sheridan has solved it for us." He waved the young man off. "Go on, and guard that room." He turned to Sir Charles. "Are we quite finished? While we dawdle here, our food is getting cold." "There is one thing more," Charles said. He glanced obliquely at Kate. "I would like Miss Ardley to serve as my assistant. She has access to the female guests and servants that I could not possibly obtain." Kate pulled in her breath. His assistant? Beryl Bardwell felt like shouting and throwing her hat in the air. Access to the details of a criminal investigation? No, more than access. Participation in the investigation itself. What a wonderful way to gather new materials for... But then her heart sank. If she had any doubt that Sir Charles knew about Beryl Bardwell, this kicked it into a cocked hat. Of course he knew, and thought that since she practiced the solution of crime on paper, she might have a talent for the thing itself. "Miss Ardley? Kate?" The prince was staring at her, perplexed. "But she is a woman." Sir Friedrich looked through his pince nez. "One reads of such things in popular fiction," drawled in a condescending tone, "but confidential investigation is hardly a suitable occupation for a lady." "I can vouch for Miss Ardley's powers of observation," Charles said. "She will be a most competent assistant." Kate, taken totally aback by this turn of events, could think of nothing to say on her own behalf. "Observation and competence are all very well," the prince said, twirling his walking stick, "but there remains a question of trust." He peered at Kate. "Can she hold her tongue?" "Miss Ardley can be trusted absolutely," Sir Charles said before Kate could speak. "I have no qualms regarding her ability to maintain in confidence." Sir Friedrich was frowning. "All this is well and good," he said, "but don't forget that she is an American." Suitable for enticing into Stone Hall for a spot of seduction, Kate thought with wry amusement, but fundamentally unreliable. "Her viewpoint is all the fresher for it," Sir Charles said. "She can see through our pretenses." He glanced at her and added, as if he were suddenly struck by the thought, "She will not be dismayed by rank and privilege." "And," Lord Warwick said practically, "since she's not one of us, she's not likely to have motive to kill Reggie." "Quite so," the prince said. "Well then, Charles, Kate shall play Dr. Watson to your Holmes." His good humour seemed entirely restored now that luncheon was close at hand. He lifted his hand to Sir Charles. "Carry on, Sherlock," he bowed to Kate, "and to you, my dear Miss Watson." He strode off, chuckling at his little own joke. As he rounded the corner in the path, they heard him say, "Her Watson to his Holmes. Quite apt, that. Quite apt."